Hi all, I'm so proud to stand here in front of you. And I was thinking, the conferences get planned a year ahead, right? And she has picked Ukraine, naturally, as one of the focus countries. Taiwan, I can understand too, okay? If Russia gets what it wants, China will get what it wants. But Canada. I think Helen is a proven witch. We know now for sure. Had she also added Denmark, it would have been 200% sure. No, I think it's 98 or something. But anyway, yes. And I think this is extremely important that we do not shy away from the challenges which we are facing today. And I know culture doesn't shy away from these challenges. I've seen it so many times. When we had culturally difficult times, let's say here in Estonia, maybe even constitutionally difficult times a few years ago here in Estonia, I suddenly sensed Estonian cultural society kind of quietly, initially not very loudly, standing behind me and others who felt that things are going the wrong way. And they were there, and you felt supported. I think when Soviet Union was collapsing, similar way, Estonian cultural elite gathered behind our dissidents. They had been the link between the world which we were living in and the world which we had been dreaming. And they had not always been vocal about it, because if you were vocal, you end up in gulag in these systems, as we now know very well. But as soon as there was the moment, they were there. And I felt the same. As soon as there was the risk, suddenly they were there. And that is why I always come when Helen invites me. I also have a few fresher memories about how culture makes impossibly tough things bearable. But also, unfortunately, in this world, we have to make them not only tolerable, but also interesting. I represent the board of Yalta European Strategy, a conference in Kiev, which is internally displaced because initially it was supposed to be in Yalta. We've stuck to Kiev location now because we refused to be displaced second time. But this conference also does art exhibitions annually. It moves around. The first presentation of each year's exhibition now during the war is always in Davos, the World Economic Forum, which has this problem that everybody talks and nobody listens. And Pichuk Foundation people found a way out of this situation. Yes, we do speak about Ukraine in Davos as well, but each year we bring out an exhibition which thereafter moves all over the world to show Ukraine today. First year, this exhibition was about killed people in Bucha and Irpin, and maimed people and raped people. Last year it was about hope. There were videos of sleeping children, Ukrainian children in their homes. But they were not just children. They were these children which many people have fought to bring back home because they had been stolen by Russians. And these children now are back home. If you think of these subjects, both of them risk to be extremely crass if you make an exhibition of these things. But they weren't. These exhibitions were extremely sensitive, extremely valuable. They were not so harsh that people couldn't look at them. And who made all this possible? Of course, it were those people who come from the cultural scene, musicians, artists, those who know how to put exhibitions together, those who knew how to tune down the horrible feelings to make it bearable to look at, and those who knew how to show sleeping children in a way that you don't feel bad by looking at them. It's fantastic what culture can do, and usually does. For me, therefore, in these difficult times, culture is a tool which helps us in this part of the world, Northeast NATO, Ukraine, also Taiwan, Canada, Denmark. It does help us. And it helps us in a way that it kind of makes the fears we have bearable to discuss. We have many fears in the society, but using the varied angles of our culture, it allows us to keep together what risks to break. It allows us to remember how and why human beings, after the horrors of the last century, learned to come together at different levels and create this network which was keeping us from letting our disputes to get so out of hand usually that they will lead to outright confrontation, creating fear, if not wars. Because I do not think that these harsh discussions which we are now having are necessarily leading to wars, but they are creating the fear for tomorrow, the fear about what we can be and what we shall be. But this fear is exactly what our adversaries are looking for. And therefore, we must make sure that we are not afraid. It's far more important, even I would say, than spending the last percentage point of your GDP on defense. Yes, that matters, we must spend and we do spend, but it does matter more that we stay strong. Because what happens, for example, if we here in Estonia are afraid? If we are afraid, then we don't live our lives as we should. We do not invest, we do not build, we do not have children. We have fear. Then, if our European friends all have fear about what might happen if Russia is strong and US doesn't understand the risks related to Russia and is busy in other corners of the world or doing other things which we do not believe should be done at all, then, of course, the policymakers, politicians start to adapt to this fear. To alleviate the fear, then the first thing which you try to do is appease. Because you feel I'm not powerful enough to stand against, then I tend to go to appeasement policy. And that makes fear already the real tool of killing European unity and really putting at risk what has been created in Europe after the Second World War and after the Soviet Union collapse. And it is our collective obligation. Everybody has to analyze the fear from the viewpoint they can. I'm an economist by training. I can analyze this fear by calculating that European economies are 12 times bigger than is Russian economy. But this is not enough to convince people. You people, you have also the opportunity to demonstrate that in free democratic societies, culture describes our society in a way which is honest, which is bringing us together, which is making difficult things easy to understand, as opposed to the culture in totalitarian regimes, where culture is just one more tool to tell the people of that nation that we are more powerful than the other people. And in doing this, in analyzing this fear with the means which you have in your hands, you will kill that fear. Because a fear dissected is a fear dead. And I'm really grateful that you have gathered to Tallinn to do that. And I wish you all the best in doing this. And also, I hope that good ideas will come out on how people like me, economists, could actually help the cultural scene to finally gain this situation which I am dreaming and which is not there. Even if we know that cultural projects like filmmaking is finally actually bringing in money, we still need governments to put the initial funds in. Why are banks not actually supporting, for example, these kind of investment? Why do they consider culture a risk? I think it needs to be resolved. Thank you so much.
Is this? Yes, thank you so much. And while we were really thinking with our team that who would be the one who would kind of like make us understand what's important in the world right now, then we thought immediately, this can only be Kersti Kaljulaid. Thank you so much. But now she's with us for a couple of more minutes. If somebody in the room has a question that you'd like to raise to Kersti Kaljulaid's attention, Pauliina Hakas, here you are.
Thank you very much. What an inspiring speech again. Most of us come from countries where governments and politicians and cities are cutting their investment into culture. And even if our sector is fully capable of producing brilliant quality and quantities and, music and culture without funds, it's also very clear that all sectors in the world also need investment from the governments. Like you said, you're an economist, and with your connections and with your credibility, I would love to hear how you try and convince politicians and people in your closest sort of circuit of why they should precisely not do that at the moment.
There are various ways of doing it, of course. One thing is to turn to history and remind people what Churchill said during the Second World War. That, what's the point of cannons if we do not have the culture to defend anymore? I fully agree with that. But I think, at least here in Estonia, we have the tendency that we have it far easier to convince our politicians to put money into concrete dedicated to culture. Somehow they are far more easily convinced to build yet another beautiful house for culture. And I think this is now the moment where we actually do realize, I believe, in Finland, in Estonia, that defense does gobble up 4 or 5% of our defense, our budgets, or our GDPs even far more from our budgets, 15% of budgets, if it's 5% of the GDP. Then maybe it is time to really put money into people and make do with the facilities what we have. Because indeed, culture is something which thrives in the buildings also, which you can see in Tallinn Kalamaja. If you think what is Tallinn Kalamaja, it's kind of old Soviet time, factory buildings quite often, revamped with very little money. Creating fantastic culture. There is Fotografiska, there is Vaba Lava, there's everything what you need. Yes, if you enter these buildings, you do not feel this grandiosity like you feel when you enter the Congress building in Moscow, or for that matter, in Vatican, their new presentation hall. But do you need it? I don't think. Particularly in these times, I think what we need is our people to talk softly and kindly to other people, to be compassionate human beings. And being compassionate human being is far easy to come by in a kind of cozy setting, a little bit shabby, not so big, than in this big palace, which makes you feel so small when you enter.
Thank you.